Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, and it's been a hot minute. I'll save everyone the long backstory, but I had to self-isolate during my holiday, so 1 week trip became 3 weeks, and now I'm just catching up on everything. However, on the positive side, it was super relaxing, and I was traveling with my Sony a7S III, giving me ample opportunity to test this thing out and put it through its paces. And I have some thoughts. So as those watching the channel might already know, I've been using the FX6 since December last year. And at the start of Jan, just a week before an upcoming shoot, I finally received the a7S III. Now from the beginning, I simply couldn't keep my hands off this camera. As someone who used to own the Sony a7S Mark I, this is everything I dreamed of back then. 4K 422 internal and up to 120 frames per second, IBIS, articulating screen, better form factor, better battery life, better color science, better image quality, and the list goes on. I keep saying it, but we now live in an age where you can't go wrong with nearly all the new cameras out there. The a7S III isn't the cheapest or best value camera on the market, but where it earns its keep is being a full-frame beast that's any content creator's dream. It's super customizable to suit your shooting needs, and being a hybrid also means that you can even use this as your primary stills body as well, as long as 12 megapixels is enough for your photography needs. Okay, with that out of the way, what do I think of this camera? You can probably already guess from my gloating, but I love it. Potentially more than the FX6. Now, don't get me wrong, the FX6 is the main workhorse camera, and it's going to be sticking around for a while. But the a7S III is designed to create. Its small form factor gives you close to the same image quality coming off the FX6, with more codec options, image stabilization, better object tracking, and the ability to add 2 XLR ports with the optional KLM adapter, and get 16-bit linear RAW out of the HDMI port. Now let me clarify that last part because I've seen a lot of debate. The 16-bit linear RAW is actually 16-bit, but using an Atomos Ninja 5 only records 12-bit due to the hardware of the monitor, not the A7S itself. Of course, you will need to purchase separate ND filters to bring it up to the same spec as an FX6, but the advantage to the A7S is the built-in image stabilization. As someone who's never had it in a camera before, I thought this would just be a nice to have, but I was wrong. The active mode on this camera, which does crop in 10%, means I can handhold an 85mm with very little shake or movement. All throughout Tasmania, I've been hand-holding this heavy Sony 24-105mm f4 lens, and the type of shots I've been able to achieve are just mind-blowing, especially when paired with the 4K slow motion function. Without it, most of my footage in the car would have just been a shaky mess. Again, for people shooting run and gun, vlogs, B-roll, and cutaway shots, this feature is an amazing asset to have on shoots. The battery life is also great as well. Compared to my a7S Mark I and even the Fujifilm X-T3 I've just said goodbye to, this thing just keeps going. With 2 batteries, I was never once stressed out about being caught without power. However, my experience so far has been shooting a lot of short shots and switching off the camera in between. But even then, I'm going a full day without needing to swap batteries most times. And even if you did manage to chew through all your batteries, it can also be powered via a portable battery pack too. So no issues here at all. The image quality is superb for such a small body mirrorless camera. As I said, up to 4K 422 recording internally, and the amount of dynamic range you can pull from it in S-Log is miles ahead of what I'm used to with my Fujifilm X-T3. The 12 megapixel sensor does have both its advantages and disadvantages. The 2 biggest advantages are the low light, which we'll get to in a moment, and the reduced rolling shutter, which is mainly from the faster processor in the camera, but it's helped by having less lines to scan. The disadvantages, however, is the 12 megapixels is your entire 4K image. So compared to some sensors which downsample a 6K image or higher, the finer details in the a7S's image won't be as sharp. Also, it means your Super 35 crop mode is only HD as well, which also looks great by the way, so there's no issues there. Now, what I don't love about this camera is some of the low light design. And I'm sure you're like, what? This is the low light king. And it is, if we're talking about being able to see in the dark. Now, there are definitely use cases for this, but for the most part, I'd say most of you won't be shooting at ISO 102,000 most days. The fact is, I'm gonna have this camera in ISO 800 most of the time, and it looks great. However, if you do need to push the ISO, you need to be really careful. ISO 1600 and above starts to get really noisy, and by ISO 6400, the image in S-Log is totally unusable without some serious noise reduction. Your only option is to go to ISO 12800, where the noise floor cleans up again. Now, Sony have said this isn't a dual base ISO sensor, but if you're going to be shooting in low light, your best bet is ISO 12800 after you hit 1600. It's a large jump, and a few creators have come out and expressed they wished it had been a lower dual base ISO, somewhere around the 3200 or 6400 range, but then it wouldn't be the low light king. I'm not complaining here, it's just something to be aware of. Do your research first and do your tests and avoid ruining your shots. Lastly, the color science coming from this camera is also a much bigger improvement over previous Sony cameras. The magenta skin tones are close to non-existent, and overall I'm fairly happy with what you can get from this camera. The higher bitrate and subsampling in the image means you can easily push it in post-production if you're going for some heavier color grading. This makes it a big improvement over previous alpha cameras where the 8-bit codec and the lower sample rate meant shooting S-Log was not recommended. My only little nitpick here is that skin tones seem to be quite yellow when adding saturation back in post-production, but thankfully this is an easy fix compared to those pesky magenta tones from previous Sony cameras. Lastly, it's great Sony have added S-Cinetone to the a7S III as of February this year, so you can easily match it with the FX6 for projects that require quick deliverables and turnaround. And that's going to wrap it up for this video. I'll have some more tips from my learnings of this camera coming soon, so make sure to hit the subscribe button and like the video if you're enjoying the content, and I'll see you all next time.